In late September of 1963, far off the coast of Africa, a seemingly ordinary cluster of clouds began to stir. This humble tropical disturbance drifted slowly westward across the Atlantic, unnoticed by many and underestimated by forecasters. Technology in those days was limited. No satellites, no modern computer models, just the occasional ship report and basic weather observations to guide predictions. The system was tracked with cautious curiosity, but nobody anticipated the fury that was quietly gathering. By September 29th, the storm had entered the warm, energy-rich waters of the Caribbean Sea, where it began to organize rapidly. It was officially named Tropical Storm Flora. Within just 24 hours, Flora exploded into a hurricane, gaining strength with terrifying speed. Its first major target was the small island of Tobago, lying in its direct path. On September 30th, Flora made landfall on Tobago. For decades, this was believed to be as a Category 3 hurricane, but modern studies suggest it was a strong Category 2, with sustained winds estimated at around 105 miles per hour. For the people living there, however, such distinctions meant little. The storm unleashed devastation unlike anything the island had seen in generations. Thousands of homes were damaged or destroyed, while the agricultural backbone of the island, its coconut and cocoa plantations, were devastated. Vast swaths of forest were flattened, changing the landscape forever. The destruction of crops struck at the heart of Tobago's economy, inflicting a blow that would take years to recover from. The death toll in Tobago alone reached 18, and damages were estimated at $30 million, a staggering sum for the small Caribbean nation at the time. But Flora was far from finished. It moved back over the open Caribbean waters, where warm seas fueled its growth into a monstrous force of nature. By October 3rd, south of Hispaniola, Flora had reached its peak intensity as a terrifying Category 4 hurricane, with sustained winds reaching 145 miles per hour. Its next target was the mountainous and vulnerable nation of Haiti, where the storm would unleash its deadliest fury. On the night of October 3rd, 1963, Hurricane Flora made landfall on Haiti's southern coast with catastrophic force. The storm's Category 4 winds, estimated at around 120 miles per hour, tore through the region, accompanied by a storm surge roughly 12 feet high. This massive wall of water swept inland, destroying homes, businesses, and everything in its path along the exposed southwestern peninsula. But it was not just the wind or the surge that would devastate Haiti. It was the relentless rainfall. As Flora crawled slowly over the mountainous terrain, it unleashed an extraordinary amount of precipitation. The island's steep slopes forced the moisture to condense and fall, resulting in an unprecedented downpour. In the town of Miraguani, a staggering 57 inches of rain fell in just 3 days. Some unofficial accounts suggested even higher amounts, possibly reaching 75 inches. The saturated soil could hold no more water. Torrential rain caused widespread flash floods and deadly mudslides that buried entire villages beneath thick rivers of mud and debris. The destruction was swift and merciless, with eyewitnesses recalling a terrifying roar as torrents of water, rock, and uprooted trees swept down from the hillsides, swallowing communities whole. Rescue efforts were hindered severely by washed-out roads and collapsed bridges, leaving survivors isolated and desperate. The death toll in Haiti was staggering. Approximately 5,000 people lost their lives, a tragic figure that marked Flora as one of the deadliest natural disasters in the nation's history. The storm also shattered the local economy, wiping out much of the year's coffee crop and stripping away the shade trees necessary for future harvests, setting back agricultural recovery for years. Meanwhile, the Dominican Republic, sharing the island of Hispaniola, also suffered. Torrential rains caused the worst flooding on record in the country, leading to widespread destruction and an estimated 400 deaths. Flora's deadly reach had spread across the island, leaving a path of misery and devastation on both sides of the border. After ravaging Hispaniola, Hurricane Flora, though weakened, remained a formidable force as it made landfall in eastern Cuba on October 4th, 1963. At that point, the storm was classified as a Category 3 hurricane, but its true menace was yet to be revealed, not in its speed or intensity, but in its refusal to move. High-pressure systems to the north, east, and west created a meteorological cage, trapping Flora over Cuba for nearly 5 days. From October 4th through the 8th, the hurricane executed a slow, looping pattern over eastern and central Cuba, subjecting the same areas to unrelenting Hurricane force winds, and record-breaking rainfall. The storm continuously fed off the warm Caribbean waters, drawing moisture and dumping it over the island in devastating quantities. Some regions were buried under over 100 inches of rain. That's more than 8 feet in just those 4 days. The prolonged deluge caused catastrophic flooding, with the Caudal River, Cuba's longest, overflowing its banks by more than 12 miles on either side. Entire towns and vast agricultural regions became isolated islands surrounded by floodwaters. The relentless pounding destroyed critical infrastructure, including roads, bridges, and communication lines, making rescue and recovery efforts extremely difficult. Cuba's agricultural sector was hit hard. The storm wiped out significant portions of vital crops, including coffee, corn, and sugarcane, severely impacting the economy. Damage estimates soared to nearly $500 million in 1963 currency, marking the event as one of the most expensive natural disasters in Cuban history. Despite the government's large-scale emergency response, the death toll rose to approximately 1,750. The island was left grappling with not only the immediate devastation, but also the long-term economic and social consequences of one of the most stubborn and destructive hurricanes in Caribbean history. On October 8, 1963, after nearly 5 days trapped over Cuba, Hurricane Flora finally broke free of the atmospheric prison that had held it captive. The storm moved northeastward back into the warm waters of the Atlantic, but even as it escaped, its fury was far from spent. On October 9th, Flora passed over Mayaguana, one of the islands in the Bahamas, with sustained hurricane-force winds near 100 miles per hour. This brief but powerful encounter added to the devastation Flora had already wrought in the Caribbean, reminding residents that the storm was still deadly. Caught in the prevailing westerly winds, Flora accelerated rapidly, moving toward the open Atlantic. During this final stage, the hurricane regained some strength, reaching Category 2 status, with winds up to 110 miles per hour as it passed southeast of Bermuda. The storm's tropical characteristics faded quickly over the cold northern Atlantic waters, and by October 12, 1963, Flora had finally dissipated, ending a nearly 2-week reign of terror. Though the storm itself had passed, its impact lingered for years. In Tobago, the destruction of coconut and cocoa plantations forced a major shift in the island's economy toward tourism. Haiti struggled to recover from the massive loss of its coffee crop, deepening the nation's economic woes. Cuba faced immense challenges, rebuilding its infrastructure and agriculture, further complicated by its tense political relationship with the United States during that era. Hurricane Flora's legacy was a stark reminder of the catastrophic potential when a hurricane stalls and dumps extraordinary rainfall over vulnerable terrain. It showed the world that a storm's deadliest power might not come from wind alone, but from relentless destructive water. The total death toll from Hurricane Flora is estimated to be between 7,000 and 8,000 people, making it one of the deadliest Atlantic hurricanes of the 20th century, second only to the Galveston hurricane of 1900. The storm's extraordinary rainfall, combined with its slow movement and prolonged impact, left deep scars across the Caribbean islands. Economically, the damage was staggering. The total cost exceeded $500 million in 1963 currency, a sum that would be several times larger when adjusted for inflation today. Entire agricultural sectors, especially coffee, sugar, and cocoa, were devastated, causing long-term hardships for local economies and farmers. The sheer magnitude of the disaster also pushed meteorologists and governments to rethink hurricane tracking and emergency response. Flora's stalling behavior highlighted the dangers of slow-moving storms, a phenomenon that remains a significant threat in modern hurricane forecasting. Because of the catastrophic loss of life and destruction, the name Flora was permanently retired from the Atlantic hurricane naming lists, a rare honor reserved for the most destructive storms as a mark of respect and remembrance. More than just a tragic weather event, Hurricane Flora stands as a powerful lesson on the immense force of nature and human vulnerability. It reminds us that even with modern science, some storms defy expectations, and their impacts can last generations. The legacy of Flora endures in the memories of the communities it touched and in the continuing efforts to better prepare for the fury of future hurricanes.